Would it be very confusing for me if I also had the live stream open? Okay. Thank you. Sure. Well, I didn't prepare that part. My name is Karen. I just graduated from UBC's iSchool. I co-host the Organizing Ideas podcast with my friend Allison Jones, who isn't here today with us. Yeah, and I'm not used to being the one interviewed, so we'll see how this goes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no editing. Mhm. Super biased. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So this was all Allison's idea. We met in library school. We started the archives program together. Actually, we were both in dual, and then Allison dropped out of the MAS. I think after figuring out that they really wanted to do libraries more, and so I stuck it out. So they graduated a year before I did, and so shortly after, I think in Allison's last year, and then shortly after they had graduated, they like we started talking about the idea. They came up with the idea because of the room rental issue at Vancouver Public Library. VPL had rented out a room to essentially like giving platform to transphobic speakers, and so that really sparked a lot of discussion around like free speech and like libraries as like a space of democracy and neutrality. And there was a lot of noise on like email listservs, and it didn't seem like the best space for that. So we figured, and also like it's like there's the challenge of speaking about things when you're employed because you want to stay employable. And so the podcast was kind of a way for us to do that, to ask like really smart and really cool and interesting people what they do, and to really unpack this idea and to slow down and explore this idea of what do we mean when we say that libraries and archives are not neutral? What are people working on? And I think the podcast is mostly, the audience seems mostly like for librarians and archivists and like information memory workers. But I would hope that, I think like your YouTube channel, it's adds a level of accessibility because like you say as well, like this profession, like we're meant to serve people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course the books are great, but this is for people. And so, yeah, I think that's the general gist.
Okay, cool. I actually just got feedback that apparently people couldn't hear my audio, so hopefully
Oh, okay.
Everyone has my audio now as well. Otherwise, you should hopefully have benefited from the fact that I turned on auto captioning in Google Meet and could read everything I was saying. Who knows? Big question mark.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for the rundown. Uh, the yeah, it's there's been a lot going on in the library discourse as of late, over the past few years. Like with, like you said, Vancouver Public Library um, having transphobic speakers coming in, and Toronto Public Library doing the same, and Toronto Public Library doing um, having other speakers of various ill repute. And just kind of a broader recognition that like libraries as institutions clearly aren't neutral, and that they very much are a reflection of the values that the people who work in them bring to them. So I'm glad that you guys are able to cover that. How sorry, I was busy like fixing audio
Yeah.
settings. How long have you been doing organizing ideas?
Um, I think it's been a little bit over a year. I think we started brainstorming about it in May, and then I had a bit of traveling last June, which seems like a very long time ago. And then I think we released our first episode in like September, but we've been working on it for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And how has the response been? Like, I've never done a podcast, so I don't know how much you can see of like how big your audience is, where they come from, stuff like that. But can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. Well, when I don't always look at our analytics because it feels like I know it's like it's anonymous, but it feels like I'm like spying on people.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But like it's, I mean, I didn't really expect anybody to listen to it. But yeah, like I think the response has been really exciting on Twitter. We were more active on Twitter before COVID when we were both, I guess, more like plugged into the internet and really working on the podcast a little bit more. So we're hoping to pick up on that now, but I think the response has been really exciting. Um, I still feel uncomfortable a little bit with the idea of my voice being there, but you know, the focus is on our guests, and so I really enjoy talking to our guests. So yeah, I don't know, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I grapple with that a lot as well. Like, it's a very strange feeling to be like a face, if not the face of the profession to a lot of people. And like, well, I mean, there's because I'm a guy. I am white. I might be straight. You can't really tell that just by looking at me. And like that's not. It's such a dynamic thing because like it's not really representative of the field, which in that case might be beneficial. But the flip side is like I represent a voice that is often heard, and especially in media. So um, yeah, I it's who knows, who knows. Um, so you've been at it for about a year now, and I know when I started Stacks and Facts, it was kind of a side project for me for grad school,
Yeah,
and I found that it was like a useful way to evaluate what I was doing in grad school. Has that been the same case for you?
I think so because I mean, when we started the podcast, I had one more year left to go. So, and I mean, I learned so much through it. And I found sometimes the things that we would be talking about in class, I could kind of like tie that into questions that we would ask the people we were talking to
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so I think having both like doing school and working and then doing the project was also just so much. But you know, in those 2 3 years, like time is so compressed, you're doing so much that like I think it really yeah, it really complemented each other well. I don't know if I would recommend taking on that much work,
Yeah.
but I definitely learned a lot. And I think having that um, while I was in school and still having it now is was tremendously useful and just really grateful to have.
Cool. Uh, So, and you just graduated recently, or are in the, yeah, you just graduated,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Diplomas arrived yesterday. Thank you.
Congratulations. We were talking very briefly before, this is for the audience, before we started the stream, and you mentioned that you might be starting up a little bit of work, and that's in the auxiliary kind of realm, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, I was doing auxiliary as like a student librarian before. Um, and I was really because I'd heard that West Van like likes to keep their auxiliary like their student librarians afterwards because they've already trained us. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, great, that'd be a nice thing to have after I graduate. And
Yeah,
then the pandemic hit, and they were like, you're very important and valuable to us, but
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. What are you thinking now that you've graduated? Is there anywhere that you would, or like any particular field that you'd like to find yourself into as a newly minted graduate?
Well, I can't be picky anymore.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
I don't think I could have been picky to begin with. I mean, I was in the dual program and I chose it because before, like knowing nothing, I was like, how different can the two professions be?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go for two, right?
Yeah,
And I think throughout the degree, though, like I could see the differences, but I still think that to people that aren't in the profession, it doesn't really matter what's like a library thing and what's an archives thing. They just want access to stuff.
yeah.
Um, so I didn't really like the questions that I got when I was in library school. Like, which one would you choose? Like, do you want libraries or archives? When I was thinking, I'm paying for both degrees. I would
Yeah.
like to do both. And I was in special collections for a while. I really enjoy it being there, although it is difficult. Like, it's like I remember in a previous video of yours, you said, like, librarianship will not love you back. Special collections definitely will not love me back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I see value in special collections, and I think ideally that's what I would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
There was a job at VPL that was like kind of like archives and special libraries and public stuff, and I was like, oh, that sounds perfect. And then COVID, but I don't know. I do like working with people. Surprisingly, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think I would enjoy it so much,
Mm.
but yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Nice. For the folks at home, so a little context. Uh, Karen and I and Allison all went to UBC, University of British Columbia. And at UBC, there are, like, the school that we go to offers like two or three different degrees. One is a MLIS, just what you would expect. One is a Master's of Archival Studies. And then there's also the dual program, which combines those two. So you get the library and information side and the archival studies side. There's also Masters of Arts in Children's Literature, which is under our school as well, but that's a separate thing. So when Karen's talking about, this side or that side or both, that's the context behind that. Um, Now that you are graduated, do you see any, or do you expect perhaps to be able to use some of your experiences on the podcast in the profession going forward?
Ooh. Um, I like that the podcast has really helped me like know who's kind of or be familiar with what's out there because I think a lot of like like I've bounced around UBC library a lot because I was there as an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that's helpful because especially if I'm doing reference, I can't know everything and I will never know everything. But I'm good at like finding out. So
Mm-hmm.
I do like how the podcast has helped me kind of refer people to things. Like if I'm talking to someone and they want to know more about X, um, I won't have an in-depth knowledge, but like, I might know someone who does.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. And I like being able to connect things that way. I think the podcast has been really, especially with just doing like reference, which is kind of like helping people find things. I think maybe that has been the most useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a very similar experience. I'm gonna try something, so everyone gets to see. Oh, that's not gonna work. Never mind. Tech troubleshooting on the fly. I've had the same experience a lot of times. Like, I think that's one of the things that I love about having done Stacks and Facts is, or continuing to do Stacks and Facts because it's not done, is like back when I was first doing videos, I would do like these really in-depth researched videos, and I would list all the sources, and I still do whenever that ends up being the case. And you wouldn't believe how many times it comes up in conversation, like, oh, well, somebody has a question about gender and librarianship or equity or things like that, and I can just be like, oh, well, actually, you can go check this video sources. That actually happened. One of my friends here in Vancouver was doing a research paper, actually, and they were like, hey, can you point me towards, and I can't remember what the subject was, but I was like, yeah, just go check the sources for this video. And like, it's a nice little thing. So yeah, I'm gonna pop to the chat because I know it's there and people are using it, and I've been ignoring it.
I closed it because there was so much echo in there.
Yeah, yeah. I feel ya. Let's see. So Philip, here's me. Were you guys talking about the So What LIS podcast? No, but have you heard of the So What?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well,
Ooh.
I know, right?
Well, now with like being at home and less commuting, I don't always listen to as many podcasts as I would have liked.
Yeah. For those of you at home, I actually have a list of things going on right now that we will talk about at some point. I'll just post the link to that in the chat right now.
It's called the So What podcast?
Apparently, So What LIS.
Ooh.
So What LIS podcast. So What? The podcast about library and information science and why it matters. Ooh. I like it. Cool. So that's added to our list. What else do we got? And that was by Arziz, so thank you, Arziz. Anyone want to shoehorn the movie Public about now? Yeah, so the movie Public. Are you familiar with it, Karen?
I saw it, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I am horrible and haven't seen it yet, even though our library did a stream of it, a private showing.
I think Lassa did a stream of it too.
Yeah, I'm a schmuck. It's fine, guys. I get it. But interestingly, there is this guy named Ryan Dowd who he works at a homeless shelter in Chicago, or he runs a homeless shelter in Chicago, and he does a lot of training for librarians and other folks around how to work with homeless folks. And he credits a lot of his work and like work with the librarian community to that movie. Because the director, whose name escapes me at the moment, came to him for input to get a feel for like how that all plays out. And you can learn more about that in a link that I will post to it in the document. So there is that. Good movie shout out. What else? Karen and Peter speak in a program transcribes. Correct. To be honest, mainly watching this video as a way to fill time until an expectant repair person arrives. You know what? I'll take your views for whatever it means. Hope this helps to know whenever Peter sees this. I appreciate those live streams. Oh, thanks. Cool. All right, so that covers the chat. We are all caught up now. If anyone has any questions, leave them in the comments and we'll get to it. But before I jump into the list I put together, Karen, what other kind of LIS adjacent stuff do you consume? Anything out there that really whets your appetite?
I'm trying to think. Because I haven't been listening to very many podcasts recently. I would like to get back into it, but like with no hour-long commute, like what do I do?
Yeah, right. You just sit there. Just pretend you're commuting.
Yeah. I like the meme in the bathroom where anyway. I'm aware of a lot of like newsletters, like in the library lead-led pipeline one. I think you linked it in the doc. I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and there are a few like email listservs that I'm subscribed to. I feel though like right now transitioning out of being in school, I'm still figuring out what is the thing that I want to consume rather than the stuff that's just fed to me. So I don't know if I have like a nice answer right now. I'm sure Allison probably has answers to that question.
Yeah, well, I'll hit them up later and be like, hey, Allison, dish dirt. But I totally feel you on this. Like when I graduated, well, before I graduated, the big thing was like I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life, because of course I did. You know, as a grad student, you have like this optimism that's probably unfounded, and so like I was exactly subscribed to what I wanted to do, and I was active in those communities. And for me, it was the open education movement and the open,
Mm.
like the open with a capital O movement broadly. And so when we look at that list that I've got, there's a few things relating to that. But yeah, after I graduated, that changed because I was not in an academic library, and that's where a lot of the stuff in the open realm takes place. Even though it would make a great fit
Mhm.
for the public libraries. Um, and so as it lost relevance to me, like I kind of slowly drifted out of it. Although I did go to a conference call this morning, right before this, that's by the folks at Spark, which is like scholarly publishing and rad comrades. I don't know what it stands for, but it's much more official than that. But they have a monthly like group call where it's just folks who are in the open realm who are also librarians coming together and talking about the issues they're facing.
Mm.
And that's really cool just for a little bit of camaraderie and to see what's going on in the field. They're also the folks that run a conference called OpenCon. And
Ooh.
OpenCon is a blast. I recommend anyone to apply for it. And if you have questions about that, hit me up.
There's
Um,
also the Digital Humanities Summer Institute has a course, a week-long course called Open Access and Open Social Scholarship or Open Scholarship.
mhm.
And I went to that, and if you're a student, like you essentially are almost guaranteed a scholarship to go. It's a week at the University of Victoria. Um, and it was kind of like a basic, like, what is open access kind of thing. You talk about copyright, but that was interesting. And like, it kind of brings together people that might not just be librarians.
Mhm.
So, yeah, if you're interested in that, like, I think that's a decent thing to check out.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one thing I'm curious to see how post-pandemic things get approached because like
Right.
there are a lot of conferences, and I found them like as a student like I find them really nice to go to because you can meet people and have in-depth conversations outside of the panels and learn about stuff that you wouldn't otherwise see. And while you can do a great webinar, it's just not the same. But maybe that's going to be the next big thing from the pandemic is figuring out how to adjust to that new social norm.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, it is nice to like the cost now, I guess, is a little bit lower,
Hmm.
but it is very different from physically being there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think part of it, I've mentioned before, like I'm a big advocate of going to school in person if you can, because like it's your chance to be removed from everything else and just focus on this one specific thing. And I think conferences often tend to be like a smaller example of that. Um, but it's doable. I think we'll see what new norms pop up.
Hmm.
Let's see what is in the chat right now. Da, da. So Esteban Sanchez says, I do listen to podcasts and audiobooks while doing some walking around the house. Excellent. I think we could all do that. My partner's better than that, better at that as well than I am. Ian McAlpin clarifies the journal because it's an open access journal. Open access, capital O, is in the library with a lead pipe. So thank you for that. Quentin Fool says Beyond the Book is a nice short podcast from the publisher's perspective, and that's a perspective that I think is important. Yeah, because we don't. There's often a lot of tension between libraries and publishers,
Hmm.
and seeing how that plays out would be really nice. LAL says right now I have a part-time page position at the local library and a technician position at a corporate library, and I'm taking an online MLIS courses. I think I might be crazy to do this all. You know what? Maybe, but uh, that's fine because you're doing what you care about, I assume. If not, then maybe we should reassess where you're at. Uh,
Rest is also good.
Rest is super important. Yes, yes. Have you been resting, Karen?
Oh, now, yes. But I was just thinking, like, when we started the podcast, Allison was working
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I was in school full time and also working. And then somehow we like put out an episode every week. Um, and then when COVID hit, we were just like, I can't do anything. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're still like, we can barely do it. Like it's starting, it's better, but I don't know how we did that for like months. So.
Yeah, That's bonkers. I mean, like I say that, but I'm right there with you. When I first started Stacks and Facts, my goal was a video every 2 weeks, and I was
Yeah.
doing it for a while. Um, and then I realized that, oh, this takes so much more time than I have waking hours. Um,
Hmm.
and like it's the same with everything. Everyone should always emphasize sleep over everything else. So sleep.
Yeah.
Quentin Fool says, I have my MLS degree, but not a library job yet. What can I do now to build my library skills while waiting for public library job postings to appear? Ooh, you have any good thoughts on that, Karen?
I have the exact same question. I don't know. I guess what I'm doing right now is like resting
Mhm.
and kind of figuring out, okay, what are the like the library media that I want to consume? What kind of skills do I want to, because I don't want to like go back to work and then wish like, oh, I wish I had used my time to, I don't know, learn how to code better or something.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to find that balance of like, okay, resting because this might be my last summer of extended, not much to do.
Hmm.
And also just, okay, what are things that I should really do right now?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, as far as my thoughts, like what could you do to build your library skills while waiting for a library? Whew. Well, I can tell you what I try to do. I signed up for Code Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Made it so that it was free for 3 months for anyone who was laid off or otherwise underemployed because of COVID. So I signed up for that and I started doing that to learn JavaScript, kind of as a refresher course. Well, for JavaScript I'd never learned before, but to learn JavaScript and then review Python. And I found that what was very difficult is committing the time to do that on a regular basis. Because, like with everything going on in the world, it's super hard um, to focus on any given thing. And so you can try that. Go over to Code Academy. They've probably got a link somewhere there. But like for libraries itself, maybe one of the best things you can do is up your media consumption for now. See what's going on. I follow lots and lots of library people on Twitter, and I will add some of their names in that list that I posted a link to so you can track them down. Um, yeah, just I think that's how I've been staying abreast of what's going on everywhere. Like, I noticed or I learned today that like university libraries in the U.S. are all gearing up to open, and in Canada that's just not a thing right now, um, or at least not to the same extent. So, but it's an important thing to keep track of what's going on professionally.
Which I figure is something you would do as a working grown up person anyway. So
Yeah,
I'm like, might as well just do it now while no one's paying me.
exactly, exactly. And the cool thing about that is there are some folks, like you can find library directors. Chris Berg, who is the director of MIT Libraries, uh, she has a great Twitter handle. We have a certain amount of like affinity because Chris and I are both veterans of the U.S. military and realized that oh we could do such better things with our time and effort. And we both like still look back on our times fondly. But yeah, if you find MIT Library, search for Chris Berg. It's Bourg. Anyone that you follow that comes to mind?
Oh, there's there's a few. Oh, there's a lot of people I really look up to. I follow. Oh, I don't actually know how to pronounce her name. Tamar. And then I can Tamar Evangelistia, and then I don't know how to pronounce it. Daughtery. But yeah, she's associate university librarian at Cornell. Kind of want to be her when I grow up. Um, Man, there's so many good librarians. Zakia Collier is, we were in the same scholarship cohort and we interviewed her on the podcast as well. And I really look up to her. She's the web archivist at the Schomburg Institute Research Center for Black Culture, I think is the place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's, oh man. I feel like if I list people, I will inevitably leave people out.
Yeah, I feel yeah. I found Tamara's Twitter. So it's Tamara Evangelista Doherty. Um, and then I'm gonna find Chris Bergs as well too. And for those of you in the audience, who do you follow? Well, let us know in the comments, and I'll add them to the super list. I assume there might be a super list like this that exists somewhere already.
Yeah.
But if I find that, I'll link to it because that's the magic of the internet. Um, we also got a question from Sparrow. Do either of you have a background in academic librarianship? Karen, did you said you worked at a couple of the UBC libraries, yeah? Just as
Yeah,
a
well,
student?
I guess as a student, it's pretty easy to work. Like there are opportunities to work at the library. I started off in the programming services office in my undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and then I showed up at Rare Books and Special Collections so much that eventually they hired me to do a project. And then I was at Circle, our digital repository.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see how like digital repository librarians work. And then I was back in special collections. I did some preservation work. Right now, I'm doing like online reference. So it's kind of like that chat with a librarian thing. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, I think that's the most like academic librarian thing I've done because so much of the questions are from university students doing research.
Yeah.
But my background or my work experience has all been as like generally a student worker. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Same. I did. So I worked with Erin Fields. Erin is our liaison librarian, and she's awesome. Erin hired me to be her graduate research assistant because she went on her research sabbatical and needed some help. So the focus of her research was using open source materials that the library has. So, like in the institutional repository, or at UBC, we have a thing called Open Collections, which is just a bunch of digitized historical documents for the province. Um, Using those in grade K through 12 classrooms to teach history with the primary sources themselves rather than just textbooks. And that was a blast. I got to meet lots of academic librarians and see what they were doing and see what role they played in the institution. I got to meet, not that it's hard, because she's so good at making herself available, but Susan Parker, who's the university librarian. Um, and like yeah, it was a really good behind the scenes view of things. Uh, and those are working relationships that I kind of again like just like the folks that you go to class with, these are relationships that you take forward with you into the future. So but that's about it where we are because we're both Karen and I are both still fairly early career people is a
Mm-hmm.
kind way to put it. Yeah, so what other questions do we have or comments? I might take a day's chance to try to watch the streaming after it's done. Well, Arziz, I hope that you can watch this afterwards. Quentin says that the trick of it is a trick of building a routine of media consumption. Um, yeah, and I think it's one of those like bandwidth things. We all only have so much
Mm-hmm.
bandwidth right now, and so if you can't do, if you can't put out there, then take in. Yeah. So let me see if I can get my nifty streaming software to open this window of the library media stuff that I've got going on, and then we could talk about it. And then if you, Karen, have any ideas of like what some other thoughts about it, we can figure out
Mm-hmm.
that. It'll take me. Oh, it worked! Haha! First
It
shot.
works.
All right. So the first thing we've got on this list is so organizing ideas podcast. We just talked about that. Privilege of being the guest. The second thing is Stacks and Facts. So me, if you're watching this, you already know that this exists. But if you are here because of like a tweet that Karen or the organizing ideas folks had tweeted out, my name is Peter. I am an early career librarian, and I make a YouTube channel called Stacks and Facts, where basically I make library propaganda. The intent behind that is I want people to care about libraries and understand what libraries do. And I want librarians to think about what they do more critically, and hopefully so that we can change the system into something a little bit more humane for everyone, whether that's the library worker or the employee. The next thing on the list is it sparked libraries and OER forum. So this was the thing that I was at this morning. Basically, once a week or once a month, librarians just come and hang out and talk about their open efforts. Since somebody had mentioned interest in not public library in academic librarianship, this is a great resource. You should check that out. Sign up for it. It's also an email digest, so like if you have a question about open practices, you send it to the list, and then it gets sent out to everyone, and then you get a wave of feedback. I've made some really cool connections through that, so that's a good way to get involved. In the library with the lead pipe, Karen, do you know a bit more about that than me, maybe?
Ooh, I don't know if I would know more about it than you, but I know that they published some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think that was where the article in my last video by Fobazi Itar, that was published there
Educational.
originally, talking about
Yeah.
vocational awe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good one. There is a Twitter account slash organization, loose organization, all about precarity and libraries. And that's run by Ian Henninger and a couple of other folks. And Karen, did you meet Ian when you were at UBC at all?
I did not, but we did meet him for our second episode on precarity
Oh, cool.
for the episode. Yeah.
Nice.
And might be doing something else in the fall with Ian. Who
Nice.
knows?
Who knows? Who knows? And then, yeah, I would love to have him and the other folks come and talk about it as well because, yeah, COVID made it real. Made it real, y'all. Bookish Realm is another YouTuber, actually, who I recently found and who's actually been around a bit longer than me. But I want to say her name's Ashley. She's a public librarian in the States. Oh, that's not what I wanted. No! Sorry, now you can see my email, y'all. Okay. She's a public librarian in the States, and she started on YouTube as a booktuber. So talking about books, talking about literature. And she's great. And you should go check her out, check the channel out. She's got a lot more content than me, but it's also much more specific to her experience. And then, of course, Fobazi Itar, who I mentioned in my last video. Have you heard, Karen, of the Cardigan newsletter?
No, I have not.
Ooh.
Sounds very librarian.
Yeah, right. It's a great name. So the Cardigan newsletter is it's a newsletter that's run by a couple of folks here in Vancouver out of VPL, not associated with VPL, just to be clear. And I think it's a lot of children's librarianship, but also public librarianship generally. And you can check them out. They send out a newsletter weekly, or not weekly, monthly. So if you scope that out, that would be good. What else do we have on the list? Indigitization. Ooh, yeah. So indigitization is a... Do you know anything about indigitization, Karen?
Indigitize, it's a toolkit for like providing resources to digitize First Nations Indigenous knowledge. They provide grants, I believe, and like resources and like on so that communities can kind of take ownership and take charge on their own knowledge, and so that it's not, their knowledge doesn't like sort of belong to an institution. I believe Sarah Dupont, who's now head librarian at Huehua, did a lot of work behind indigitization.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I had heard of it and I follow it on Twitter, but like it's a little outside of my realm, so I don't know tons about it, but it's definitely worth looking at. And I keep meaning to reach out to Sarah or someone else and be like, hey, does anyone want to come and talk about the Indigenous perspective around librarianship? Because like Huehua itself is just such a fascinating and really important kind of thing. For those
Mm-hmm.
of you who don't know, which is probably most of you, there is a library at UBC, University of British Columbia, called it is just quite well, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then their collections are all around Indigenous and First Nations information here in Canada mostly, and also British Columbia. And one of the cool things about it is that they have their own classification system. I think in a past video I referred to it as the Huehua classification, but that's not right. It's based on, I want to say, Brian Deere.
Right.
Um, and the cool thing about it is that prioritizes the it prioritizes organizing information not from a Western centric perspective. So, like, if you look at Dewey, for example, you will see things like we've got the top level categories, so like philosophy and like art and science, all of these things. Whereas in Indigenous knowledge organization schemes, it might be more, I think, like location based. And then from there, you go down to like whatever comes after that. But again, I don't know enough about it to speak too well about it, which is why I'd like at some point I want to have someone else come and talk about it.
We did an episode with Sarah and Amy Pro. They're both Métis librarians at UBC, and the conversation, I think it was called like Navigation, Rebellion, and Resistance, and they used to have a beautiful friendship, and it was like just a pleasure interviewing them.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I've met Sarah a couple times because I had done some work with like or volunteering. I think maybe it's been a long time. It's been time has no meaning anymore. With the education library, and I had some run-ins with Sarah a few times. Yeah. Oh, so Colleen in the chat, Colleen Tyson used to be. Colleen is amazing. We did a presentation at ALA Midwinter 2018 about libraries on YouTube and librarianship in YouTube. Colleen does or did the channel UI Special Collections. So for University of Iowa Special Collections. And I mentioned her because in the chat she said that she is happy to chat about academic librarianship if needed. Yeah, Colleen is a gem and a resource. So thanks for offering that, Colleen. Yeah, other than that, does anyone else have any questions? Let us know in the chat and we will address them.
Maybe
Or
I'll add Sam Popowich's blog.
yeah.
He's the Discovery and Web Services librarian at the University of Alberta, and he wrote the book Confronting the Democratic Discourse of Librarianship. And I think the subtitle is a Marxist approach.
Nice.
And yeah, we interviewed him as well, and I had to listen to it several times because it's quite dense. But he writes a lot. His blog is redlibrarian.github.io. Yeah, and there's just a lot about, if you're interested, I guess, in like academic libraries and intellectual freedom, maybe from like a very like theoretical or philosophical approach. I find like there's a lot in his brain.
Yeah. What was his name again?
Sam Popowich.
Spopowich.ca. Cool.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, redlibrarian.github.io. Great. So we will put that here. Sam Popowich. Cool. What else out there? Talking about Marxism and libraries got me thinking about our dear professor Richard Arias Hernandez.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the profs at our university, Richard, he teaches all of the tech courses, or many of the tech courses, but then he also teaches, what was it even called? It was one of the most important classes I did. Like, basically, criticizing technology's over reliance, or criticizing how technology is used as a crutch rather than as a tool. And it was so good. And like a lot of it talks about like socialism and Marxism perspective on like social media, like how as people using social media we are prosumers, so we are both the consumer of the product and the product itself, which is like a really important thing that people
Ooh.
don't think about themselves. Um, so I'm glad to know about another person like that. Yeah. Anything else comes to mind? I think that's about it. Yeah. Can you tell me any secret things that you guys have planned for organizing ideas coming up?
Well, we figured that the weekly thing was not working for
Mhm.
us, and then even bi-weekly it was too much. So we're gonna spend the summer kind. Is that a dog?
It
The little
is.
pattern. Okay. uh, we're gonna spend the summer recording. Are we gonna see the dog?
Yeah, come here, Vic.
Okay. Oh, it's a big dog.
Oh yeah,
Oh, a
Vic's
puppy.
it's Vic's a good dog. She's the puppiest of puppies. Anyways, you were saying us.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna spend the summer recording, hopefully releasing things starting end of summer, beginning of fall, and so we'll actually do things in seasons. At first, we're like, "Oh, this is fine. We don't need to do seasons," and now we're like, "Oh, this is exactly why people do seasons to avoid burnout." And
Yeah.
but I think we had been wanting to do an episode on security in libraries for a while, especially like with the Winnipeg Library. They have
Mm.
like kind of, airport-esque security,
Mhm.
like bag checks. And so, it doesn't sound like a very welcoming space.
No.
And, I think especially with our current political climate, it would be timely and I guess something that we just wanted to dedicate more focus towards. So, yeah, I think that those are things that are kind of coming up.
Cool. When you say seasons, what does that look like? Because I'm not super familiar.
I think for us right now, we might just record as much as we can for the summer, release it in like, schedule it for like to have a backlog and then take a break and then kind of pick that up again,
Hmm.
rather than kind of like consistently trying to have something up every week.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've thought about trying to do that as well, but like, just doesn't work out, sadly. But I hope that you guys can do it. I was actually curious. Where do you record? Like, what is the? Actually, this is a great question. What does it look like to put together a podcast?
We have I made a page on our website on just how we podcast. So we used to go to the Vancouver Public Library at Natsumatsu in the Central Branch. They
Hmm.
have recording equipment that you can book. It was a little tricky because you have to book 2 weeks in advance and
Yeah.
you have to make sure that everyone's schedule kind of aligns. But it's great they have like recording equipment there. And then I also have a Zoom recorder. So it just looks like this.
Yep.
And then we edit using Audacity, which is a free software program. What else? Well, with remote recording, we use Skype just because it's pretty easy to record.
Hmm.
Although I think it like people are like, why are you still using Skype?
Okay.
Yeah. And then we transcribe all of our episodes because I think for accessibility and
Hmm.
also I know some people don't want to listen.
Yeah.
And so we just do it by hand because I'm a fast typer and I don't
Hmm.
mind re-listening to the episode.
Hmm. Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've started doing live streams lately, as you have noticed, being here, and I haven't done a lot of transcribing of them. So I have a disability, which like I can type very fast, but it comes at a steep cost. But I discovered the other day that I can turn captions on Google Meets, and it's actually a little bit better than like YouTube's auto captioning.
Mm.
Um, it does a pretty good job at identifying breaks between sentences, and it seems to have better voice recognition, so all of that is good. But yeah, props to accessibility stuff. There's actually a new PhD student who I met through other channels who's coming to UBC for uh, archives PhD or information PhD next, well, this upcoming term.
Mm.
And he brought up the point, like, I love your channel. I wish I could access more of it. I was like, yeah, fair. fair. And with the old scripted content, it was much easier to kind of do that because you just copy the script and then paste it in. And then YouTube automatically sets the timings.
Wow.
Yeah, like YouTube.
Technology.
Yeah, like for all of the criticisms that I have of Google and YouTube as a company, they've been fairly responsive about like when people bring up criticisms or problems with their technology, trying to come up with a solution. And it's not always perfect, but it is always a work in progress. So. Yeah, this is not a paid advertisement for them. Yeah, cool. So I think we're coming up on the hour. Folks, this is your last chance to get a question into the chat. If you have a question for either Karen or me about other librarianship media online, let me just post again a link to a very simple list that we've got started. And if you have any other media that you can think of that that should be on this list, go ahead and put it in the chat as well, and I will add it to the list. Yeah. So this guy says, Javier Rodriguez says, hello, new subscriber here. Are there PhD and doctoral degrees in library science? There are. Yeah. Karen, do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, about PhDs?
Yeah.
For myself or in general?
Just in general. Or yourself.
Oh, I'm tired. I don't want to do it. I think, well, like, I just remember starting the master's and they said, because the thesis is optional, and they said, if you want to do the thesis, maybe we can groom you to do the PhD, which makes sense, but also sounds kind of creepy. I guess like with PhDs, my thing is like, why are you doing it? And I personally would not want to do a PhD unless I knew exactly why and whether that really long essay at the end was useful. Because my problem is that even though long form writing is valuable, I'm going to read it, my committee's going to read it, and who else? Yeah. Is that really useful?
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing for me right now is that, yes, it would be great to, if there was something that I really wanted to pursue for like 5+ years, but the thing at the end, I would want it to be something that's useful.
Yeah. Yeah. And Murray Schellenberg, who is, you know Murray, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, Murray just popped in the chat. I bet he's been lurking
hi,
there.
Murray.
Yeah, he's been lurking there the entire time. He says that PhDs are great if you like research. Yeah. So my perspective is I actually thought about doing a PhD in information science because that's what UBC offers. And I was really thinking about it. And then I went and I talked to the other PhD students who are currently enrolled, and like I love them to pieces, and they're all smart, wonderful people. And I couldn't get over the fact of how tired they all seemed. And that's not to say that they didn't care about what they were doing, but like, I love sleep, y'all. I love sleep so much. And I like, weirdly, I think it's just a certain amount of schadenfreude. Like, now I'm thinking, now that we've been in a pandemic state for however long, maybe going back and doing a PhD would be really fun. Like, there are some things I'd like to explore around online video and information accessibility more in depth, but like, it's so much work, and I already have like guilt around not building up my retirement for however long I've been in grad school and before. And then like there's the other thing of like I would love to do a PhD and end up teaching at UBC, but I want to do both of those things. And generally, when you do a PhD, my understanding is that you can do a PhD wherever you want, but you probably won't end up getting a teaching position after that at the place that you did your PhD, because they want a bit of diversity of experience. Yeah, so Murray says PhDs are great if you like research ... but will not necessarily get you a job. Ain't that the truth? Esteban Sanchez replies, well, you need to focus your research into something more actionable. Yeah, and that's a good point. Like when you do your PhD, of course, it's not just the thesis at the end. It's not just your dissertation. It is the whole experience. Like if you care about publishing, it's a great way to get published. I think what would make doing a PhD more appealing to me is if, like, and maybe I could pioneer this, or someone else probably already has, but I just think I have because I'm a white guy who pioneers everything. Like figuring out how to take the thesis and turn it into something like this, like something more casual and more accessible to the masses. I think that that's a big frustration I have. Is so much of academia is so inaccessible to the public when they need it the most. So, yeah, those are the thoughts. If you want more information about getting a PhD in librarianship, just find any school, almost any school probably, that does the MLIS, and reach out to them and say, hey, do you have any PhD students I could talk to? Because the answer to the question is yes, there are PhDs in library studies and PhDs in LIS. It just depends on what you want to do with it, and where you want to do it, and what you want to focus on. Lots of things. It comes down to lots of things. Yeah, so you need to research something more actionable when you decide to do. Oh, so Esteban is doing his PhD, sounds like. Or no, when I decide to do mine, I want to adopt the action research approach to it. Then you can build something out of your research, probably start a consultancy firm, develop a new method or software out of it. Yeah, again, as long as you go into it with an idea of what you want to do, I think a PhD is not something that folks should take lightly, because it's such a big commitment. So, yeah. Well, I think we're around time. Thank you so much for being here.
Nice. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Of course. For everyone who wants to keep track of Karen and organizing ideas, how can they find you online?
So we are, let me just make sure I got it right though. The podcast is on Organizing Pod on Twitter, and organizing with a Z, not an S. And then I'm also on Twitter at Little Bookworm, but spelled in Middle English, but it's a protected account. And Allison is also on Twitter with a protected account. Well, everything's on our website, which is organizingideaspod.wordpress.com.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. And so until next time, everybody, thanks for watching, and don't forget to ask questions. And yeah, feel free after this is over, if you're watching this in the distant future, put questions in the comments, and I will read them and find them and pass them on to Karen or what have you. But yeah, stay safe, y'all, and take care. Okay.
Right.
Bye. And I think